Now, welcome along. Ryder Cup is upon us. Ryder Cup week certainly will be upon us very soon. It will be on Sky Sports, who also sponsor our football show commentary as well. And we thought, who better to talk to than Padraig Harrington, who has played in 6 of them and was captain, obviously, the last time Team Europe were in the US. So, without further ado, Padraig Harrington. Welcome back to the show. Last time I was talking to you, Rory McIlroy had just won the Grand Slam.
Correct. Yeah, it was a big time in golf and Irish golf. Yeah, amazing times. But now we've moved on to something new, the Ryder Cup.
We sure have. By the way, belated congratulations, because this summer, Senior Open at Sunningdale, only 5 players, as you would know, only 5 players in history have won the Open and the Senior Open. That was in July. And in June, you won the US Senior Open in Colorado. 7 straight pars on the way in to win by a single shot. So 2 senior majors in a summer. That's no bad thing. Even you, I hope, are allowing yourself a certain pat in the back there. That feels good.
I am. I've been a little bit erratic this year, but I won the big ones, which is nice. I won the important ones. I wouldn't be me without saying that I messed up at the PGA from a like an into my like. I was so comfortable with 5 holes to play, and I messed it up. So coming back and winning the two certainly means it's a very good year.
Yeah. When I heard you say at Sunningdale you were struggling with your swing, I thought he's definitely going to win now. That was one of the more Padraig Harrington things I've ever heard. Oh, no, it's
I
terrible. It's awful.
I do. I was panicking a lot that week with my swing. I hit some real big wides in the middle of the summer, and yeah, I was doing it at Sunningdale very much in practice a couple of times early in the tournament. So it had me on edge all the time, which I am better, as you said, when I'm on edge. That PGA I alluded to, I lost purely because I relaxed. I'm definitely a better person when I'm all hyped up, and a bit of fear in me keeps me focused.
Well, then, I suppose, natural segue. I presume if you follow that logic, you were pretty good with your opening tee shot in Ryder Cups down the years, were you?
Yeah, I have to go back all the way back to the World Cup in '91. Paul McGinley smartly let me hit the tee shot off the first tee in Portmarnock, which is a nightmare tee shot. 2,000 people standing on your left and the sea on the right. Yeah, yeah, I hit that down the middle. I couldn't see the ball by the time I went to hit it, and consciously had to tell myself to pull the trigger, which is not ideal. But it worked, and it gave me a lot of confidence. So in the Ryder Cups, pretty similar, except for in Brookline in 2004, I snap hooked it off the first tee against Jay Haas, like right into a bush, had to basically concede the hole. So that's a pretty embarrassing start. I stood up on the next hole and probably hit the best tee shot of my life around the corner, and from there I went on to win the match. So sometimes, yeah, you can't read too much into individual shots, and if a player who's really playing well, we often see that they hit some bad shots, but they seem to be bulletproof. A player who's not playing well, he hits an average shot, and he sees that as the first cousin of his game falling apart. So
Mm.
it's a lot to do with confidence, how things are going, attitude, how your perception of individual shots, which and as I said, your perception could be totally out, but that's the nature of the game.
Ryder Cup 2025 is so eagerly anticipated. On paper, neutral venue. On paper, which team is better? Which 12 are better for you?
Oh, yeah, Europe is a better team.
Yeah.
Europe is definitely a better team on paper, but that's at a neutral venue. I think the US are going into this one with doubt, whether it's the changing of the guard for them, but they're not going in there with the same intimidation of players. They don't have a Dustin Johnson. They don't have a Brooks Koepka. They don't have Jordan Speed. Don't have Patrick Reed. These guys are big names, big stars, and even off their game, players would struggle to beat them because of their stature in the game. They're going in with some fine players, new players, but they don't hold the same command at the first tee box. And that's a bit. I think the European players are more household names in many ways, but obviously the US still have some very top players, and they have a lot of good players in the team, but they just don't have that stature that like a Dustin Johnson or a Brooks Koepka brings to the first tee.
Yeah, it's not too often that you'd say that about the two respective teams on paper.
Yeah, well, obviously we've got this same 12 names going anyway. If
Yeah.
if one would if the Hogarth brothers change, but yeah, our team is not is a consistent team over the last couple of years. They seem to be playing great. A lot of them are coming into good form at the end of the year. There's a mixture of form coming into the end of the year, I would say. So but definitely household names, big brands in the game of golf, people you tune in to watch. The US definitely having a change in regard. Scotty is dominating so much in the States that it's nearly reducing what everybody else can do. So people like Marakara aren't his biggest star because Scotty's just winning so often. And Rory, when you've two guys dominating and winning so many tournaments, what's left for everybody else?
Did you approve of Luke Donald going again as captain?
Yeah, I think it was the only choice. He'd done such a great job the first time. I was surprised he wanted to go again. A winning captain is a great thing. He's putting it all on the line. And sure, if he wins again, it will be the greatest captain of all time, no doubt about it. But he has put it out there. He's put himself, needlessly he could have walked away as a winning captain. Now he's put himself out there, put his neck on the line in many ways, and fair play to him. He's definitely the man for the job. Obviously, we have a bit of a changing at the moment, and without the live players being captains, there wasn't a lot of people who could step into it. I'm a big fan of giving the job to many people. I think it's an honor to be Ryder Cup captain, and I think everybody who has served the European Tour well should get that honor. Uh, but in this particular circumstances, Luke was definitely the man for the job. There was no one else, and he's worked tirelessly towards it. He's in an ideal part of his career where he can focus on this, and I do believe, you know, I know it's a cliche. He's left no stone unturned. He's going to be trying everything possible and a few new things to counteract this home crowd.
We'll come to that in a second. Um, you honestly could have given me 15 to 20 guesses at who the next US Ryder Cup captain would have been a couple of years ago. Keegan Bradley would not have come out of my mouth. This is so left field. What's your read on this? Why have they gone this way?
Uh, Well, one thing they've gone this way because he's PGA champion and it's selected by the PGA of America. It's got nothing to do with the. I assume the players might have a little say in it, but there's nothing to do with the PGA Tour. Let's say it's a PGA of America thing. Uh, he's a good man for the job. He is a very. I was if he took the captaincy and played, he wasn't the right man for the job because he meant he didn't understand what the job was. The fact that he decided to opt out of not picking himself and playing because he is one of the top 12 players in the US at the moment. The fact that he opted out does say he knows what's well, he has a good idea what to expect, and he's a tough character. Why they didn't pick him going into Rome, I don't know. This is a person you don't want to go against on the first tee. He can shoot any score you like. He can get in your face. He's a little bit upsetting to play against with all the waggles and the mannerisms. He's a ideal match player, and if he can bring that to the captaincy, he's a tough character. I think he's slightly different to Luke, as in Luke can be underrated because he's quiet. I think Keegan is underrated at times. Uh, I don't know why he's underrated so much at times. Why they didn't pick him the last time? But as a captain, I think he brings a lot of fight to him. He's prepared to stand up for himself. That's for sure. And we'll see what happens. As I said, a lot will be revealed during the matches. It's hard to know. I've seen some very strong characters go in as captain and then become soft, be nice, too nice. And you've seen some nice players go in as captain and they're tough as nails. So it's just, yeah, kind of have to wait and see.
Yeah. The American team in particular feels like a very delicate ecosystem, like even when Stricker won a couple of years ago, the nicest thing anyone said about him, I mean, I'm kind of paraphrasing, but was like, oh, he just left us alone. The Brooks Koepka, he just didn't make me go to meetings. If I wanted to go to the gym, I went to the gym. He left me alone and let me just get on with it. So there's that aspect to the Americans. And then, I mean, 2 years ago, really, a lot of them arrived rusty, hadn't played enough beforehand. I know they've Bradley has managed to get them out and play weekend just gone by, so he's addressed that. But even you think of Capgate. I mean, whatever was going on, we now know they weren't paid then, and now they're all getting $500,000, 300 of which goes to charity. But still, like that's wrong. There's just something wrong with the team environment of all that's happening. So he actually has a job on his hands here to sort these guys out.
Yeah, there mightn't be as many big egos in the team this time round. I think the problem you have with the US compared to Europe. So if you go into a European team room, obviously everybody's playing for Europe. I think Luke has moved that on now to everybody playing for their country in Europe because there wouldn't be as an affinity with the European Tour now because most of the players are playing in the PJ Tour. But when they're in the team room, they don't have to be the number one European. They can be the number one Swede, the number one, you know, I'm trying to think of this number one Spanish player. You can be the number one from your country, and that's ego enough. Whereas in the States US team room, everybody's always competing to be the number one US guy. There's always two or three guys fighting for that position in the team room, to be the number one for sponsors, the go-to, the biggest brand, whatever it is. Whereas in Europe, I could go into the team room at one time, I'm the number one Irish. There you go. There's no ego there. So, or my ego is addressed, let's say. So the US have had that problem over the years. Like simply, like you look when Phil and Tiger was in the team room. Tiger's clearly the number one player, but Phil wants to be the leader and wants to do the talking. How can he stand up and tell Tiger what to do? Tiger didn't want to do it. Tiger was very much of the Brooks Koepka mode early on in his career, for sure, where he just wanted to do his own thing and wanted to do his practice and wanted to go to the gym. Didn't want to be involved in all that stuff. It has changed now, but back in the day, that's for sure. So their egos are much harder to manage. Maybe this year, with the likes of, a few more rookies in the team, the likes of Ben Griffin, Sam Burns, surely they're not going to, they're going to be a little bit more order to their team. Who is Scotty is clearly number one. Nobody's fighting with him, so maybe everybody will fall into line in the US a lot better. But we've always had that advantage in Europe that we didn't have to. I didn't necessarily have to compete with Lee Westwood for who's the best player in the team because Lee's number one English, I'm number one Irish. That's fine,
Okay.
sort of way. That it's always been like that in Europe.
Okay, interesting. Having done it and obviously having played in six of them, where are you on the importance of the captaincy? Because it's often much debated around Ryder Cups.
Yeah, it's very important. It's turned into being, if it's going to be a close match, the captaincy and is crucial. It makes all the difference. Clearly, if you have a better team, and you hold the puts, you win. But outside of that, the captain has a huge important role to play. What he says and does, and we've seen this over the years. Europe has gathered, and the US now, because they've learned from Europe. They've gathered what's worked over the years, put it together, and most teams won't be doing anything that doesn't work anymore. Years ago, for example, I used to play with Paul McGinley in the Ryder Cup because we were both Irish. It was a bizarre pairing considering how consistent he is tee to green, and I'd be a little bit erratic. We were just not a good combination. Little things like that have changed in the game. The mistakes have been made over the years. That is just the way it is, and a captain has to make a mistake for the next year. Pretty much so for the next captain to learn from. What we've seen is Europe was always been first to move on those things and have learned from those mistakes quickly. But the US have followed suit now. The US have seen this and they do the exact same things as Europe.
Mm.
So, a simple thing, you if you're going to pick somebody, you got to think about picking them. Will he play Friday morning and will he play 5 matches? You don't pick somebody to leave him out and play him in the singles. You must play everybody before the singles. And ideally, you wouldn't play anybody 4 times before the singles. That's a luxury that doesn't happen too often. But those are things we've learned over the years that even our bet, if it's anybody who plays I think anybody who plays 4 matches into the singles, they like have a 30 something or maybe 40% win rate. And that's the very best player in your team when it comes to the singles.
Okay.
So you're trying not to do, there's loads of things that's been learned over the years. As I said, Luke has a few new things to counteract the away crowds. But essentially, it's gathered up all the good stuff over the years, everything that's worked, apply that, try and avoid any of the mistakes. But as we all know, when the shit hits the fan, who knows what's going to
Yeah,
happen?
you scramble. And so, like, Eduardo Molinari's almost talked about as like a savant at this stage. He just goes into a dark room with all the numbers and comes out with the magic combinations. So, like, yeah, I mean,
And
I get certain things. I get, if the par threes are all odd numbered and you've the best par three player in the world, you can orchestrate things so he's playing into most of the par threes, or maybe par fives, and there's certain kind of they're real basics. I'd say 20 years ago, guys figured those ones
yeah,
out. What's an example of a cutting edge stat that in 2021, for instance, you're happy to reveal now that you thought, ooh, that's interesting, we'll use that? Because people are fascinated by whether this is all just the captains and vice captains talking up their role and is actually a bit of BS, or whether it's real.
Oh, when it comes to picking the teams, picking your players, you can discount all the average, all the there's pressure rounds during the year. So that's probably one of the big ones that when it comes to picking your whoever you're picking, who has played well in the majors essentially and on Sundays when they're in contention. So somebody shooting 65 to finish fifth on a Sunday, that round is discarded. We don't care about that. We want somebody who's shooting 68 on a Sunday when they were around the lead and under pressure. So things like that would be one of the things coming into the tournament. Obviously, the basics of years ago, who's a foursomes player, who's a four-ball player. Foursomes players are normally the ones who are consistent. Four-ball players are the ones who make more birdies. But what we kind of learned now is it's not, it's more styles of play. So you want to make sure that for years, if you're playing with Phil Mickelson, Phil is going to miss greens and get up and down. Well, if he's playing foursomes, the guy he's playing with's got to be able to get up and down. He's got to be comfortable hitting those chip shots from all weird and wonderful places. So that would be pretty standard. I think nowadays, yeah, they look at the difference. Who's a good short putter and will likely have more good short puts? Who's a good long putter? Who's a good iron player? Who's a good par three player? Who's long? Who makes lots of birdies? And then still the traditional of, who's a leader, who's prepared to be and this is, I certainly, I remember I played with Luke Donald in 2010 and we were a terrible partnership. Neither of us were the leader in the group. It needed to be more clear cut. I played with Ross Fisher the same week, and I was the boss, and I told Ross what to do, and Ross believed everything I said and played
Yeah, I
unbelievable.
remember.
So
Yeah.
we've seen that before. We saw that with Sevi and David Guilford back in the day. So that's not new, but these are the things you've got to look out for in your
Yeah.
team. You're trying to pair. There's a lot that goes into those pairings, and it really isn't. But again, probably the most interesting stat for me in Ryder Cup, pretty much everybody who plays badly plays well in the next round. It's really weird. So if you guy goes out and plays bad, he doesn't have any time to practice, yet he plays well in the next round. That's a very common trait that very rarely do people play badly 2 rounds in a row.
Right. You said there, and the other key tenet is not repeating mistakes. So, kind of
Yeah.
unfair question, but Luke Donald rings you and says, "What mistakes did you make in 21 that I shouldn't repeat?"
But Luke was there.
But he wants
So
your opinion.
oh, well, we've chatted about it 2 years ago. We didn't chat about it coming into this one, but we chatted about it, and he was there in 2021 with me. So and before, and there was nobody more stronger advocate for Luke having the job after seeing what he did as a vice captain. I thought his opinions and thoughtfulness is very good. Uh, yeah, what mistakes do we make? I'm not sure. I've erased it from my mind. If that's the case, as I said, yeah, it's really, I'm not even thinking there was, if you know what I mean. I'm sure people would, everybody would second guess it. One of the big second guesses, which I've quite enjoyed in the last couple of days, is the amount of people saying, "Oh, why didn't they keep a spot for Wentworth? For the winner at Wentworth, or Alex Noren's come into great form." Well, I got heavily criticised for keeping the spots open onto the end of Wentworth. So you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. So, that's very much when I look back at my own. Yeah, I'm not sure what myself and Luke took from that. I know we did have the conversation, and yeah, I'm sure if he felt there was a few mistakes, he probably didn't tell me.
So, obviously, the home advantage aspect to this event feels greater than ever. Um, the setting up of the course to suit your team is just a huge, huge advantage. Uh, c- can you give us a sense, really, of what kind of aspects to Bethpage it'll suddenly suit the Americans now? And I suppose maybe more importantly, say the Europeans don't win here and say this home away thing continues, are we going to have to get to a point pretty soon where it's neutral setup, where like it undermines the event a little bit if this run continues? No.
Look, I've said that all along. A neutral setup would be great. It's never going to. Well, might happen in 100 years' time. It ain't happening now because this just adds drama to the situation. It's brilliant having the home and away. It was very important for Europe to have the home advantage over the years. Now Europe has got stronger. You could start advocating for a neutral setup, and maybe not a neutral venue, but the actual setup being neutral. So for Bethpage Black, everybody who's watched the US Opens, the US PGA there, will remember this is a beast of a golf course. Won't be like that at all this week. They've widened the fairways, they've opened it up as much as they can. So essentially, this is turning into what the US love is a big long golf course with very fast greens and lots of birdies.
Yeah.
Whereas Europe will always go for a more strategic golf course, very tight, heavy rough, limiting the more tee to green, good play pars. The Americans want birdies. So it's not the bet page that we have watched over the years. It will be yeah, a lot more birdies and a lot more free flowing and a lot more. Well, there always is drivers there because it's a big course, but it will certainly seem to suit big hitters and birdie makers.
Interesting. Because I remember even, it's always been thus, even in Hazeltine when Clark was the captain. Justin Rose said afterwards the pin placements were like a pro-am, like middle of every green. Should the Europeans, I mean, given they're playing American golf.
Well, I have to
Go on.
stop you there.
Sorry.
The 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 home captain has nothing to do with the pin placements.
Yeah, but I don't
Nothing
know.
whatsoever. Nothing
Do you
whatsoever.
think there's ever a little bit of undue
No.
influence? You know?
That's conspiracy theories from 30 years ago. Not anymore.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
no. I think you will find I was there obviously in
Yeah.
Hazeltine. They set the greens up very softish and fast. Now I don't. Again, they don't necessarily have to. They have a you could say we want the greens slow or fast. Certainly that kind of happens. You can encourage them. You can't tell them the pin positions. You can't say I want all the pins in the left or I want easy pin positions. But the fringes were wide, so that meant even if you put a pin tight, it doesn't. If you've got 3 yards of fringe on top of your 3 yards off the left, say on a pin, that really is 6 yards. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of that happened in Hazeltine, and maybe maybe the US PGA who set it up are aware that they want the birdie fest. That could be in there that they want lots of birdies for TV. I can guarantee you in Europe, the home referees. Now there's two of them set it up, one from the US and one from Europe, but the golf course is set up to be as tough as it can be and the greens to be slow in Europe. So there is the influence, but the pin position is not. No.
Okay, fair enough. It's a funny thing though, like there shouldn't be any great difference between the two sets of players, should there? I mean, like
It's getting
it's
it's
closer.
getting more
Yeah.
closer.
Yeah.
Like there wasn't a European based player who made the team this year. So really, they're all US players playing, and that's going to be a problem with the Ryder Cup down the road. If everybody goes to American college and then comes out and plays straight onto the PGA Tour, they're never going to have the chip on the shoulder that the guys who started in Europe always looking over at the US and believing they have everything and they, wanting that. So, if you went to a regular European Tour event, every guy is practicing on that range to get to the PGA Tour. Whereas if you went to the PGA Tour, there's not a lot of people practicing on the range because they all believe they've arrived. They're
Yeah.
there. So
Interesting.
that there is a chip on the shoulder with a regular European, but there's less and less of those guys. You know, Getting to it. They move over there, but eventually that's the rivalry can be lessened. And I know Luke has worked very strongly on that. And as I said, it's moved away necessarily from playing for the DP World Tour or the European Tour. It's now, which I played for. I absolutely played for the European Tour. I had a serious chip on my shoulder about us being the country cousins. I wanted to play for Europe, whereas now he's got the players playing for their countries and nationality and Europe as a whole.
You referenced it, I think, a few times about the atmosphere over there, and it'll be a New York crowd, so it'll be vociferous. And Luke Donald's trying new things. The virtual reality headsets have caught the imagination, so the players will wear these all week, and the headsets will say mean things to them, and this will harden them to the occasion. Personally, the thought of a week having that stuff pumped into my ears, I wouldn't go that route. I'd be trying to focus on the positives and build up a wall of positivity, but each to their own. Your thoughts on that, and how bad was the crowd in Whistling Straits?
So we've got to understand with Bethpage and the New York crowd, if the Americans don't get off to a good start, they're going to get the abuse. So the only way Europe will get the abuse to start off with, they'll get the abuse if the matches are tight. But if Europe can get a lead, they'll get in the back of their own players. That's what they do with their teams. So the New York crowd is a tough crowd, full stop. So if Europe can get to a good start, get out there early, get a lead, and keep that lead, it could really, really not just quieten the crowds, but turn the crowds. As regards to players, you know, I will say at Whistling Straits, like I was told stories from fans who wouldn't cheer because they were being abused. If the fan, like we'd so few fans, but they said they kept their mouth shut eventually because they were just getting abused for cheering. So yes, the crowds were nicer towards the end in the Whistling Straits because they'd won easily, but the match wasn't tight. In Betpage, if the match is tight, it's going to be really tough what people say and do. Now, the interesting thing is most of the people who are saying and doing this thing, if you met them on the street, they're grand people, they're nice people, they have a few beers in them on the day and they get carried away. So nobody is coming over the fences. That is the one thing the players have to understand. This is golf. There's nobody coming over the fences. They're well safe and protected. There's no harm no matter what's said or done. So it doesn't matter how abusive they are, it's only words. That's all it will be. The second thing is, and this would be for me would be the issue. What if things happen during a shot, prior to the shot, in the shot, which actually could put a player off as he's playing? That is an unknown. Like I know myself, I'm very peculiar, as you would know. But for example, over the years, if somebody took a picture of me, I would get not a picture, would click their phone. Oh, I get put off for it. But then they legalized that you can use your phones and it no longer puts me off. So I was being put off by somebody breaking the rules,
Yeah.
not by what actually was happening. So again, if players on these VR headsets can help this, if players can get their head around that what the people are saying and doing doesn't necessarily reflect them, doesn't, you kind of have to put it in a category, you know, if they were at a soccer match, they would hear the same and worse. And they'd be sitting there, they mightn't be doing it themselves, but they'd be laughing at other people doing it, or, kind of. So it probably, I think the VR headsets could be a good thing to condition them. I think Dokovic has been brought in to talk to them about how to deal with the hostile crowds, and nobody knows better than him, like
Yeah.
in the end of the day. So, it really dealing it is very important. I know one of the things I wanted at my one was, when players and their whole, and then remember, it's the families. It's not just the players, it's the families that can get abused, and that simmers behind the scenes. So one of the things I made sure with mine was I said, look, anybody with wives or families or physios or trainers, whatever it is getting abused. Bring it to us. Tell us about it. Don't be telling your other wives or other friends, because then that becomes a little bit of a group of 4 or 5 people thinking it's terrible. Don't go to your friend, go to us and we'll deal with it. So they have an outlet to get rid of it, because they need an outlet. You got to say, you're not going to keep it yourself, but they need the right outlet so they can express it and get rid of it, and we could do something about it. And the wrong outlet would be to have it amongst a few wives, and then it goes to their players and everybody's getting upset about it, and one comment has dragged 3 players into it rather than staying
Yeah.
with the one physio and player or whatever. So I think Luke is doing everything right about this. He's preconditioning him to it. I'm sure he'll have, you know everybody not warned, but they're in a position that they have somebody to talk to, somebody to get rid of it, somebody to, and then there's plenty of security and that can deal with it. And as I said, you can have a zero tolerance, but I think half the people would be kicked out if there's a zero tolerance
Yeah.
for,
Yeah.
for it. So, but I think if you do kick out anybody who says anything that crosses the line, the main abusers, all of a sudden other people will stop being crude anyway, and crossing the line. There's nowhere for that, but. We all want the Ryder Cup with tension in it. This is why it's such a good event. So, it's not a question of everybody being out there and being choir boys. It has to have some cheering for your home team. Uh, I never want anybody to cheer against anybody for hitting a bad shot, but I would think that you should cheer so loudly for your home team that it creates an atmosphere
Yeah.
around the golf course.
I suppose ultimately 12 individuals will have to handle this in their own way. Like, there is possibly an argument that somebody like Shane, who can run hot, can ride that wave of, well, you just said this to me, F you, watch this shot. Now, probably it can go too far then and it becomes a distraction too, but certain players might actually react, kind of getting their back up, maybe doesn't hurt their golf, or maybe you think you can play good golf hot. I don't know.
You're just bringing it to mind. I was walking with Rory in Hazeltine, and somebody said something pretty abusive to him uh, in the crowd a couple of times, I think. So they said it at the crosswalk. So he went into the ropes to go after him. And I'm standing behind him thinking, all I'm thinking is, if he goes in there, I have to go in there. And the two of us are going to be throwing handbags for something. I was really, it was one of those ones, your friend is doing the posturing and you're behind him thinking, oh no, does somehow back out of this quietly. But yeah, yeah, we don't want to see any of that. But look, yeah, I know what you mean as regards players can play well. I think that's like having an angry emotion. We've seen people get angry on the golf course. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So the key here is, if I was down in a match, I'd love somebody to shout something bad at me and make me angry, because I'm losing the match. I want things to change.
Mm,
If I'm up in a match, I don't want to change my anything in the match at that stage. I want to keep the emotions the exact same. So, that's the same with getting angry on the golf course. It can work, but it's not within your control. So I wouldn't be recommending it. I wouldn't be relying on it. I think they're doing the right thing. They're
yeah.
trying to get prepared for it, desensitized to it. And that's really, that's the only thing. But remember, as regards, and this would be interesting to see, I know my Ryder Cup experiences in the States have always been very good, because there's a vast, like half the crowd following me would be of Irish heritage all the time. So nobody ever says anything to me. There's so many home fans watching. So Shane should be okay. Like, there
Yeah.
wouldn't be an issue with that. And I think they're saying that there's 20% of the tickets have been sold internationally. But obviously, of the other 80%, how many of them are a European nationality or supporting European, who bought up those other 88%? So there should be a fair crowd, as I said. It shouldn't be like Whistling Straits that's dominated by one side. You should have a fair European support, and that's important. You don't want you know. So I
Yeah.
think they're doing the right job. I
Okay.
think they have it covered, or at least they've done everything they can.
Two last questions. The last one will be who you think will win. Before that, of your six Ryder Cups, your favourite match that you played in and why?
Uh, I've had a lot of good ones.
Hmm.
I had some great ones with Paul. We beat Tiger. We Monty as well, beating Tiger and Phil. Uh, I would probably go all the way back to my very first one in '99. When I won that match in Brookline, I thought it was to win the Ryder Cup. The crowd had all swelled at my match for the last five holes. Uh, Everybody was telling Mark O'Meara that his match was the one, he needed it. And when I won it, in my head, I hadn't watched leaderboards, but I got it that Jose was three up or something like that. So my match was the one, and I played it like it was. It was as so exciting, the drama of it, the thrill of it, the atmosphere. So I would have to go for my first singles in
Okay.
Brookline, and then it was all taken away. I got about 5 minutes out of it. Did a quick interview, I probably glided down to the 17th green, sat down, everybody congratulate me, and Justin Leonard hold the putt. Just like that. It was
Yeah.
taken away so quick.
Uh, I guess that's what we want on Sunday is that kind of drama. So you mix it all up. Home advantage. Europeans as strong next to the Americans as they've ever been on paper. Who do you think wins? We know what your heart says, but who do you really think when your head's on here? Who do you think wins?
I think Europe wins. I really do think Europe wins. I don't think the US have the intimidation factor. I definitely think they will have to handle the crowds, but I think Europe is in form, used to this. I think Luke has always proved himself to be a very uh, smart golfer, gets the most out of everything, and I think he will do it again.
Okay, very good. Listen, thank you so much for your time. It's great to get your thoughts and all of that, Padraig. I'm sure you'll be feed up next week watching. Thanks, Emil. Appreciate it.
I will watch every shot.
Yeah, I
I'm
figured.
looking forward to it. Yeah.
Cheers.